For years, we have been trying to undo the car culture, laws which favor cars and motorists regardless of what happened to people. Human life matters a lot more than cars and trucks in this city.
The NYC Department of Transportation is moving ahead with changes.
We don't want to hear you. We built this neighborhood.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That was a peek at a new documentary that chronicles the controversial redesign of McGuinness Boulevard in Greenpoint and some of the larger changes in the city's streetscape over the decades, including the impact that mayors from John Lindsay to Mike Bloomberg have had on the use of city streets. The documentary is called Changing Lanes, and I am joined now by the filmmaker, Ben Wolf. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So the film focuses a lot on the McGuinness Boulevard controversy, but in the context of all the larger changes to city streets that have happened over the decades, right? So talk about a little bit about just what's happened in the last couple of decades, right? I mean, there has been a big change away from cars sort of dominating the streetscape.
Well, I came to New York in 1991, and I've been a cyclist continuously in that time, and it's gone from being a really outsider sport activity. I used to show up at meetings like with a helmet and people would be freaking out. It's gone very mainstream, and I've enjoyed seeing that transition, mostly under the Bloomberg administration when really dramatic change was happening with Jeanette Sada-Khan being in charge of transportation at that time. And then under COVID times, I noticed the streets were getting a little hectic and dicey, and because my work kind of dried up at that time, I thought, well, this is an interesting subject to explore because there has been such dramatic change, sort of mostly positive, but also some backsliding. I also wanted to do something more broadly about just sort of politics in this country, and this seemed like a great microcosm to see how decisions are made and how progress happens or maybe doesn't happen.
Well, I thought the political, historical context here in the city was fascinating because, you know, mayors for decades have grappled with this.
Yeah.
And with Ed Koch, he actually had Sam Shorts, right, of Gridlock Sam fame. He had him put in bike lanes and then tear them out, right? Yeah. And then later implement a bike ban
in Midtown.
So so what was that like?
Well, Koch was sort of a contradictory figure. He did, well, for one thing, it tells us that nothing is new under the sun. These same debates that we're having now were happening in the 80s and even earlier. But yes, Koch, because of the oil crisis and certain things that were happening for a little while, was really gung-ho trying to help people ride bikes and pedestrians in the city. But then because he started getting a lot of complaints, he sort of quickly backed away from that, had the lanes he had just put in taken out very quickly, and then tries to ban, much like today's delivery people are getting a lot of bad press. At that point, it was the bike messengers who were getting a lot of bad press. And in reaction, Koch bans them from Midtown. My movie makes the point that actually sets off a wave of activism around cycling that actually sort of launches cycling up to another level. So there's a lot of sort of pendulum swings that have happened in our history.
Yeah. So then how did you land on McGuinness Boulevard, which obviously has been a contentious issue for years now?
Well, so my work kind of dried up. I mostly work as a cinematographer in other people's movies, but I had wanted to direct something of my own for a long time. And when my work pretty much stopped during the pandemic time, I started searching out, like, well, what would be a good story to follow? And I was shooting a bunch of different stories relating to street safety and street design, and the McGuinness story pretty quickly grabbed my attention. And in particular, I went to a meeting, which is featured in the movie, where part of the community held what they claimed was a public meeting and then locked out this part of the community that disagreed with them. And I thought, this is crazy. And this is quite dramatic and will make for a very interesting story. And it had more twists and turns than I could have guessed.
Yeah, and you go through some of the history of that as well, all the deaths and injuries on McGuinness over the years. Talk about Mayor Adams, because as we see in the movie, he started out as something of a safe streets advocate and has sort of evolved, I guess you could say, over the years, right?
Yeah, there's been a big gap between the rhetoric of this mayor and the action, unfortunately. He talked very positively about continuing the kind of things that had happened, especially again under Bloomberg, but in fact ended up undermining a lot of his own, his own DOT would come up with plans, and then his administration would keep them from being executed. And then that's what was happening for much of the time with the McGuinness story. One thing I just want to just say outright is that, of course, I have my own opinions about this, but I'm also somebody that has a car. I use, for my work all the time, I'm using cars. So I don't really have a horse in this race. I think there's, it's great to ride a bike, it's great to be a pedestrian, it's great to drive a car.
Although I did read that you didn't use the car in the making of the film.
Yeah, that was a particular sort of challenge I made for myself, was would it be possible to make a movie without using a car? Because mostly when I'm moving camera equipment around and whatnot, I am driving around. And it turns out it is possible. I got a little trailer for my bike, and I would ride to do my different interviews and whatnot. I think what we can't, that there's no really other side to safety. Like, safety has to be prioritized. And I would say that the other, another aspect of why I thought this is such an interesting story is I travel a lot for my work around the world. I see what first-class infrastructure can be. And unfortunately, in New York, we're often now coming up short. And that concerns me. I would say, I now know, like, per capita, we're having about 4 times as much injury and death on our streets as as a Paris or Copenhagen or whatever. And I think we should be as safe as those places. And not taking action just doesn't seem right.
So let me ask you, you've just wrapped up the movie recently, but you had to add a postscript because the Argentos, some members of the Argento family who were involved in the McGuinness controversy, were just indicted last month.
As well as part of the Adams administration. I mean,
right.
Yes.
So what was your reaction when you heard that news?
Well, if you had been following the story closely, you kind of knew there was some funny business going on. But I was reluctant to include it in the movie because there hadn't been there was no proof. Well, now we sort of are a lot closer to having proof. The trial still hasn't happened, but it was pretty clear, when you have a DOT working for a couple of years to come up with a plan, and then suddenly, for reasons that are never clear, the plan doesn't happen, something is going on.
Yeah. So tell us where people can catch the movie. It's just premiering next month.
Yes, it will premiere October 17th and 18th at the Architecture and Design Film Festival in New York. I believe the 17th is already sold out, but there are tickets available on the 18th. I believe you're putting the website up on the screen. It's adfilmfest.com. I think the month after, in November, it will show at the Bicycle Film Festival. It's going to be going into many film festivals. So hopefully you'll get a chance to see it, and then I hope to have some kind of streaming distribution later on.
And by the way, David Byrne of Talking Heads fame is a prominent.
He's a prominent
voice
interview. He's great because he's been riding a bike in New York City for about 40 plus years, and he has a good voice to talk about the change. And he is also, I shot a concert film with him years ago, and he brings a bike on tour, and so he's ridden all over the world, and he can also talk about, he's a good voice to be able to compare what we have here with what's working well in other places.
All right, the film is Changing Lanes. Ben Wolf, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.